I'm Taylor.
I'm Kat.
And welcome to Square Mile of Murder. Today is our penultimate episode on cults, at least for this year. Who knows what the future will hold. And today we're sort of moving away from the traditional image of cults, you know, the Jim Jones People's Temple or Charles Manson and his Manson family, to a more modern style of cult. A type of cult that operates less in the shadows, isolated from society, and instead is right under our noses. An organization which, on the surface, seems like an ordinary business, but scratch just below that surface and we find something as much a cult as anything else worthy of the label.
Many of us, perhaps even most of us, either have been or know someone who has been unfortunate enough to work somewhere that was incredibly cliquey, with strange goings-on, things, or even financials that didn't add up. We might describe it as a cult-like atmosphere to our friends over a few drinks on a Friday night. I know I certainly have. But few of us really truly believe that we're working for an actual bona fide cult. But for the employees and customers of an Albany-based company, that's exactly what they were a part of.
What's up with upstate New York, y'all? Like, this is now the third one?
Oh! Yeah. Crazy.
Is there something in the water there, or like what? Yeah, so Albany-based, we are, of course, talking about the sort of godfather of cults disguised as multi-level marketing schemes, Nxivm. And for those of you who haven't ever seen that spelled out, that's spelled Nxivm, because vowels.
Yeah. I mean, it took me a long time to even figure out how you pronounce it.
Yeah.
I think I heard you say it once, and I was like, what is that? And you spelled it out, and I was like, oh!
Yeah.
That's what that is.
Yeah. Just makes them seem pretentious.
Yeah.
But we'll get into all that, because there's a lot of pretension. So I'm really excited about this one, because this is like my white whale cult. It's fascinating to me.
Yeah, you love this one, whereas I'm just trying still to get my head around it, because...
I mean, same, but like, I think that's a problem with it. Like, there's so much that went on. There's so much to it that it's like, you could look at one arm of this cult squid and still, like, you could spend months reading about that. Yeah.
Yeah, that was my worry when writing the script. I was like, I don't know how to cover all of it. So there are big chunks missed out because we just don't have time.
Yeah.
But we could do like a year's worth of episodes and still not even cover all of it.
Everything. Exactly. But yeah, so that's what we're talking about today. So let's go back to the 1990s, where it all began. So Nxivm was founded by Keith Raniere, along with his then partner Nancy Salzman, in 1998. Salzman was a former psychiatric nurse, and Raniere had a, shall we say, complicated and questionable career in multi-level marketing. Raniere founded another multi-level marketing business called Consumer Byline in the early 90s, and I think it is kind of the same. It ended up kind of being the same thing that Nxivm turned into.
It ended up being, it was a pyramid scheme as opposed to a multi-level marketing company, and eventually was shut down. He was fined.
Yes.
Blah, blah, blah.
All that fun stuff. And Nancy Salzman was actually, she specialized in like a certain kind of hypnotism that, like, ultimately
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, ultimately she then used in Nxivm to build their curriculum. So we'll get to all that, but that's a little bit of background. So Nxivm was essentially a self-help program running a series of courses, programs that they called the Executive Success Program, which is the stupidest name ever.
So pretentious.
And of course, these programs cost thousands of dollars per seminar and included a range of techniques for self-improvement. And founder Keith Raniere reportedly claimed that the point of the Nxivm programs was, quote, to have people experience more joy in their lives.
Raniere adopted the name Vanguard, which was reportedly taken from his favourite arcade game, in which the destruction of one's enemies increased one's own powers. Make of that what you will. Salzman adopted the name Prefect, which every time I read it as perfect. And that was supposedly in reference to her being Raniere's first student, and him being the leader of this philosophical movement. It is estimated that around 18,000 people took part in Nxivm seminars and programs between 1998 and 2018, and a large majority of these people took a seminar or series of seminars, paid a shit ton of money that it really wasn't worth, and then moved on with their lives. But some were really taken in by the charismatic, engaging leader, Raniere, and began devoting their entire lives to Nxivm and to him. And as part of their devotion to Nxivm and Vanguard, Raniere, however you wish to refer to him, these followers, who were mostly women, were tasked with recruiting more and more people into Nxivm, and this is how the company turned into a multi-level marketing organisation. But before we get into that, Taylor is going to quickly tell us what exactly a multi-level marketing organisation, or MLM, is.
Yay! So, multi-level marketing is defined online by Oxford Languages as, quote, the practice of selling goods or services on behalf of a company in a system whereby participants receive commission on their sales as well as the sales of any participants they recruit. So how this generally works is that a company, let's use The Body Shop and as an example because they're well known globally and Kat has some insider knowledge.
Yep. I know quite a few people who work for Body Shop.
Yeah. Whereas I thought they just sold soaps in shopping malls. Right. So the Body Shop will advertise opportunities to become at-home consultants, and these at-home consultants will sign up and pay a joining fee of about £50 or about $70 based on this week's exchange rate. And so this £50, $70 pays for a starter kit, which includes products that are valued at about £300, as well as ongoing training and personal development to help you run your business. You then sell the Body Shop's products and get commission on each order you place on behalf of someone else or like your customers. In the modern era, especially since the beginning of the pandemic, consultants are encouraged to utilize Facebook groups, inviting their friends and encouraging those friends to invite friends, with the promise of a competition for those who invite, X amount of people to the group. You are also encouraged to recruit people to become consultants, and then you get a commission on everything those that you've recruited end up selling. So the more people you recruit, the more money you can earn. Some people are able to earn a full-time living from multi-level marketing schemes, but a staggering 99% of people who sign up to a MLM will fail, ending up either in debt or just breaking even before they quit. And in some MLMs, it is incredibly difficult to leave, just like a regular cult. Now, we've used the Body Shop as an example because it's an organization we know more about, and it does have a fairly good reputation as far as multi-level marketing schemes go. But there are thousands of others out there that do not have a good reputation and prey on people who are vulnerable, especially in times of financial uncertainty like a pandemic or recessions or natural disasters.
And we have included, there is a link in the show notes to a website. So it's called Is a MLM a Good Way to Make Money? So if you want to join MLM, please do your research first. Read into things like that. There's loads of links in that article as well.
Yeah, definitely. You definitely want to look at individual companies and see their reputations as well. Multi-level marketing schemes are often confused with pyramid schemes, and indeed there are plenty of pyramid schemes masquerading as multi-level marketing schemes, but technically they aren't the same thing.
So the main difference, MLM recruiters will tell you, is that pyramid schemes are illegal. Whereas their miracle cure to cut belly fat, cure diabetes, or just sell you shit that you don't really want or need is completely legal. And they are correct. Multi-level marketing schemes are legal, but pyramid schemes have been outlawed in many, many countries, including the UK, USA, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, most of the European Union, Switzerland, Russia, Turkey, Mexico, India, Sri Lanka, Thailand, China, Japan, Brazil, Colombia, and South Africa. Basically every corner of the globe.
Yeah.
And in some countries, MLMs are completely illegal as well.
Oh.
So at first glance, they do appear to be similar. Those at the top of the tree, or pyramid, are earning shit tons of money, not only from their own commission, but the commission of those who they've recruited, and they've recruited, and they've recruited, and blah, 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 blah. Whilst those at the bottom are struggling to get by. They're just recruiting as many people as possible to try and recoup their money. But the main difference between the two is that a multi-level marketing scheme sells you an actual physical product, whereas a pyramid scheme sells a promise or an idea, or a way to get rich quick without putting any real work in. So in a pyramid scheme, you're not selling an actual physical product to your recruitees. Your commission comes from the people you recruit and then who they recruit. Both are routinely confused with Ponzi schemes, but a Ponzi scheme operates more on a rob Peter to pay Paul structure, where victims are conned into quote-unquote investing their money, but the con man then running the scheme keeps the money instead of investing it and lives a very lavish lifestyle generally. Yeah. Then to pay back the original investors, they con others into investing and use that money to pay back the original investors. So Ponzi schemes are also illegal because they're a form of financial fraud.
So we don't really know a lot about what went on in these Nxivm seminars because their content is classed as a trade secret and therefore subject to non-disclosure agreements which all attendees had to sign before the seminars began. However, there are a few things we do know about the structure of the organization and its hierarchy, which was represented by colored sashes, kind of similar to the colored belt system in martial arts. This is one of my favorite things. This phrase just keeps echoing in my head this week, that in order to move up the sash, hierarchy, it's called following the stripe path.
No.
Yeah. Because there's the colored sashes and then you get little stripes on them for different levels within each. So it's
a combination of martial arts and military ranking.
Literally, though, yeah. And they're the ugliest scarves. They're these super shiny satin, it's terrible. It's really terrible. Yeah. So the followers are usually referred to as students, and according to Frank Report, colored sashes are awarded according to the number of people the student has managed to recruit. And this isn't really anything new in multi-level marketing schemes. They often have colored tiers to demonstrate who's earned the most. to motivate some by showing them what they can achieve, or to humiliate others who have not earned enough. The same article, which is linked in the show notes, explains that some of these seminars are run as intensive 7 or 16-day courses with reported prices ranging from $3,000 to $10,000 for the courses. The day begins at 8 a.m. when students are locked in the classroom to ensure that nobody can disrupt their learning. And then the classes go until as late as 11 p.m. Students have to remove their shoes at the beginning of the day and pay tribute to Raniere or Vanguard, as the students were supposed to address him, obviously. And they are taught the correct way to shake hands, as well as, because of course, a secret Nxivm handshake. And they were instructed that they had to bow to Raniere and Saltzman, whom they must address as prefect, if they were to meet them.
Yes. As I understand it, not everyone actually got to meet him.
No,
because they were given this legend,
yes,
essentially.
Exactly. And like, as it got bigger, there were executive success program centers all over the world. So, you know, they had the one in Albany, but they also had one in Vancouver, LA, Mexico City, like all kinds of places. So, I mean, now I don't know if this is part of his whole shtick, but I don't think he could be in multiple places at once.
No. But that was part of like drawing people in, was you might get the chance to meet him.
Oh yeah. And so like the classes were run by members who were higher up the Stripe path. So you have like, I think to be a teacher type, it was called a proctor. So you had to have done X number of classes yourself, thus putting in X amount of your own money and recruiting X amount of people.
And these long days are punctuated with short breaks where students are offered small vegetarian snacks. Because, according to Raniere, heavy foods ruin concentration and make you drowsy. Which, like, sure, carb coma, but normal balanced meals are good for you.
No, you just get 1 carrot every 6 hours. It's fine.
But food restriction is a common tactic used by cult leaders, and this is because keeping your followers in a continued state of hunger, dehydration, and or exhaustion means they are more likely to be compliant, they have less energy to think critically about the way the cult is being run, or about what they are being subjected to, and crucially, they are less likely to have the capacity to plan a revolt or to try and leave.
Yeah.
So, in between these veggie snacks, these students are taught about all of the horrendous problems with the world today. But it's not all doom and gloom, because there is one man who can save us all from this awfulness. None other than Vanguard himself, Keith Raniere. But the indoctrination into the world-saving abilities of Vanguard does not end there. Students are also told of his achievements as the world's foremost inventor, but, conveniently, that all of his inventions are far too advanced for normal humans to understand, which is why we can't use them, we can't see them, we don't understand them.
Of course.
And this is due, of course, to his 240 IQ score.
Okay.
And his total recall memory, meaning he never has to take notes about anything. He also claimed to be a triple major graduate from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. Students were also taught that Raniere was a concert-level pianist and reading and writing whilst most kids are still in nappies. So at like the age of 1 or 2. He was also the East Coast Judo champion at the age of 12. Not the junior champion, the adult champion at the age of 12.
Obviously. Makes total sense. Now, as if all of this wasn't culty enough, students were also taught that those outside of Nxivm, especially those who tried to discourage others from joining the executive success programs, were suppressives trying to impede the organization's development. And those who had left the group and rejected Raniere and his teachings were said to have undergone, quote, the fall, becoming lost people for whom bad is good and good is bad. And some were even told that they were high-ranking Nazis in a previous life. Sounds great.
Well, that's all that this story was missing.
Yeah.
High-ranking Nazis.
This is so similar to Scientology. Even just the wording of like, oh, this is a suppressive person. Like, that's phrasing that they use in Scientology as well. And there's actually, there's quite a few similarities, including like, in Scientology, there's a thing called like auditing, which you like obsessively talk about like feelings or experiences or something in an attempt to go clear on them and absolve them from your whatever. And they did a similar thing in Nxivm called EM, I think. It was like an exploration of meaning, and you basically like sat down in front of a group of people and relived a traumatic experience, and that was supposed to like cure you of that trauma.
Well, on Wikipedia, on the Nxivm page, there is a little infographic that shows influences upon Nxivm beliefs and practices, and Hubbard, brackets Scientology, is one of those direct influences.
Oh, yeah.
We've also got judo, just judo,
yeah.
multi-level marketing, the US Navy.
Oh, yeah.
And off of that, there's like scouting and acting. They kind of branch off the US Navy. Saucer culture, I don't know what that is. Space opera, sci-fi.
Yeah.
Freud, Freemasonry. There's all kinds. Hypnosis.
Yep.
Rand, objectivism.
It's really like a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
Yeah, so all that fun stuff. Now, concerns about the group's practices began to surface in the media in the early 2000s, just a few years after Nxivm was founded. Cult investigator Rick Alan Ross began investigating Nxivm, and in 2003 published excerpts from the organization's handbook. Ooh, I bet they didn't like that.
No.
This led to a lawsuit due to the previously mentioned NDAs and trade secret status of the organization's techniques, although it was dismissed, and then dismissed again following an appeal from Nxivm. Ross concluded that Nxivm's practices were, quote, expensive brainwashing, and then this was followed by more negative publicity for Nxivm in Vanity Fair and Forbes, among other publications. Nxivm were reportedly expecting a series of glowing articles from the U.S. publications, but were stunned when Edgar Bronfman Sr. was quoted as saying he believed that Nxivm was a cult.
So Edgar Bronfman Sr.'s words were significant for a number of reasons. One being that he was an influential businessman, but the other was that his daughters, Claire and Sarah, had well and truly drunk the Nxivm Kool-Aid. Or Flavor Aid, for accuracy. The sisters had reportedly loaned $2 million to Nxivm, which was to be repaid via personal sessions with Nancy Salzman, or Prefect. They detached themselves from the family, and their father had become worried not just about the financial impact of their involvement in Nxivm, but also about the emotional and mental strain. In the following years, the sisters would go on to make a number of very bad, very large investments based solely on Raniere's advice, and it seems that most, if not all, of these investments were failures. Yeah, he had no idea what he was doing, he just told them what to invest in.
Yeah.
And I can't remember the final figure. I saw it the other day and I was like, I need to write that down. I can't remember how many, millions, tens of millions they lost, if not into hundreds of millions. I can't remember.
I think all told, they put, multiple hundreds of millions of dollars into
See, I have
Nxivm.
$200 million in my head for some reason.
Yeah, that sounds right.
But then I was like, did I just add some extra zeros and it was actually just 20 million?
No, it's a fuck ton of money.
I love that there's people with the kind of money where we can talk about just 20 million.
Well, and so the Bronfmans, that family is the Seagram Beverages fortune. So big money.
Yeah, but it seems that despite these very public concerns, Nxivm just kind of went back to normal and continued to grow and attracted more and more wealthy and influential students.
Now, as well as attracting all kinds of celebrities, politicians, and society's elite across the US, Canada, and Mexico, Nxivm also began to utilize these connections to exert power over New York's legal system. It's never good. Nxivm kept a number of files on high-profile political figures, including political consultant Roger Stone and Senator Chuck Schumer, as well as George Randolph Hearst III, CEO of the Hearst Publishing Empire. In 2008, the Bronfman sisters put pressure on district attorneys in New York and New Jersey, New Jersey's Attorney General, and even the New York Governor Eliot Spitzer to begin criminal investigations into critics and enemies of Nxivm. And at the same time, the group were organizing meetings between Raniere and the Dalai Lama, who came to Albany to speak in 2009.
I mean, that is just crazy.
It's wild.
It wasn't actually quite as simple as that because the Dalai Lama kept cancelling because of all this negative publicity, but was eventually persuaded.
It was something like Nxivm or the Bronfmans agreed to donate like an obscene amount of money to something that the Dalai Lama was supporting or drawing attention to, and they like managed to just sneak Raniere in to like basically like a passage time between one of the Dalai Lama's events and another one. And of course the Nxivm people like pitched it as like, well, it's this big deal, and they had this meeting and they had all these camera crews and shit, but in actuality it's just like he was going from one speaking engagement to the other and they were like walking down the corridor together kind of thing.
So basically what happened was they ambushed the Dalai Lama.
Pretty much. Which like just seems rude.
Then things all go a bit quiet on the Nxivm front again, at least as far as the general public and mainstream media are concerned. A small expose came out in 2010, where former Nxivm coaches described students as prey and described the organisation as little more than a vehicle to enable Raniere to explore his sexual preferences with vulnerable people and gamble with other people's millions. This Times Union article alludes to the organisation as a sex cult, but that didn't seem to raise any alarms amongst the public, and once again, Nxivm continued as normal, recruiting more and more people and preying on more and more vulnerable women. So the makeup of Nxivm students was reported to be 3/4 female. That's a lot.
Yep.
Yeah, that was until 2017 when reports began to surface about a secret group within Nxivm called DOS. And that is when the Executive Success Program really hit the fan.
So in 2017, investigative journalist Frank Parlato began investigating Nxivm, and his articles on the organization can be found at frankreport.com. And he published an article about how women were essentially slaves within DOS and Nxivm. This was followed by an article in the New York Times about the practices of this secret group, DOS. Sarah Edmondson is a former member of Nxivm and DOS, and she helped lift the lid on what exactly had been happening within the organization. But to understand all of that, we have to go back a few years. So as Nxivm had grown throughout the 2000s, one of the influential celebrity followers it had attracted was an actress named Allison Mack, who joined Nxivm in 2010 alongside her Smallville co-star Kristen Kruk. Now, although Kruk didn't stay with Nxivm for very long, she left in 2013, Mac became one of the organization's biggest supporters, recruiting family and friends to take seminars and becoming very close to Nancy Saltzman and her daughter, Lauren. Mac even picked up stakes and moved from Canada to Albany just to be close to the organization's headquarters. According to some sources, Mac overtook Saltzman and became Ranieri's second in command. Whether or not she did take Saltzman's place, one thing we do know for sure is that Mac was one of the leaders of the now infamous group within Nxivm known as DOS.
So DOS stands for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, which we're just going to refer to as DOS.
Yeah.
Because I can't say that again. Which roughly translates to Master over Slave Women. I actually Googled it to check what the exact translation was. Apparently it's not actually Latin, it's like Pig Latin.
Yeah, it's not.
But yeah, Master over Slave Women, and that's exactly what Ranieri, Mac, and Lauren Salzman were. Masters over a select group of women. This secretive sisterhood, as it has been referred to, began in 2015 and saw dedicated female members of Nxivm recruited by Mac supposedly into a group of like-minded, strong, empowered women. But like everything else within Nxivm, DOS was not at all what it seemed. Mac, Ranieri, and Salzman were masters of this select group of women who were referred to as slaves. And as part of the induction into DOS, the women were required to hand over explicit or compromising photos or videos of themselves as collateral to ensure they did not reveal what went on in DOS. But one woman decided that she had had enough of Nxivm and DOS and their predatory behaviour. And in 2017, Sarah Edmondson went public and told the story of her time in Nxivm and DOS. Sarah had been a member of Nxivm since 2005 and was recruited into DOS by Salzman in either 2015 or 2016, not entirely sure, but left in early 2017 after her experience. On the advice of another former member, Sarah contacted Frank Pilato, and he began publishing articles about Nxivm, and he agreed to keep Sarah anonymous. The aim was to raise awareness of DOS and stop its most painful part of the initiation process. Although a few months later, in mid-2017, Sarah finally went public with the New York Times.
And her story you can also listen to in depth on in the CBC Uncover podcast. And I think it's season 2. And it's called
season 1, I think.
Season 1, and it's called like Escaping Nxivm. Very, very good. Highly recommend. Oh, and she's also the sort of main subject of the HBO documentary series The Vow. So what was that painful initiation process? Well, Sarah and the other initiates were told they were going to be tattooed in sort of the pelvic region, kind of like hip bone area, right? In a position that could be easily covered with underwear. And according to Sarah, she was instructed to ask Lauren Salzman to brand her. She was then blindfolded and pinned down on a table by 3 other members of DOS. But instead of receiving a tattoo, Sarah and the other inductees into DOS were branded. And this wasn't kind of, cattle type branding where you stick an iron in a fire and then press it to the skin, which, is over and done within a few seconds. No. This was done with a cauterizing pen and took an estimated 20 to 30 minutes.
That is horrific.
It's horrifying.
You cannot understate what that is. If you're expecting to be tattooed and then you are burned
for a half an hour.
Yeah.
And the entire time that it's happening, you're supposed to be silent and grateful.
Yeah, you're also blindfolded and being pinned down.
Held down. Yeah. And all those other women in the room pinning you down are realizing they're next.
Yeah.
It's horrifying. And
yeah.
And the other thing, so we'll get into this in a minute, but like there were different sort of subsets within DOS. And for some of them, the members were the ones who were forced to brand like their same level members. So it's just like layers and layers and layers of horrible.
Yeah.
And to add into all of that, the brand, which was initially pitched as like a symbol to represent the elements, earth, water, fire, all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
If you look close enough, you can see it's actually a combination of Keith Raniere and Allison Mack's initials.
Yeah.
Cool. And if all of this wasn't bad enough, and it certainly is, there were also reports of the women being forced into sexual slavery, which, is really just a more palatable term for sexual abuse and rape. According to an article by Refinery29, the sexual abuse stemmed back to Raniere's belief that his sperm could control women.
Sure. Why not?
For all of his IQ points, this guy doesn't seem so smart.
No.
One former member explained that followers were told that if they were sad or feeling pain, then Raniere was sad and feeling pain. And if they did anything wrong, it would affect Raniere. And if Raniere was unhappy, he would essentially sort of sick his followers on the women who had wronged him until they got back in line.
Yeah. It's proper like pack mentality. Yeah. The women chosen to be inducted into DOS were all women who Raniere considered sexually attractive. And these women were subject to severe diet restrictions to ensure that they maintained the body type which was acceptable to Raniere. They were also encouraged to attend volleyball practice on an evening, and even those who didn't like sports felt pressured into doing it because it was a way for them to be closer to Raniere, maintain favour with him and with Allison Mack. And some even thought that it was a test of their loyalty, whether they went or not. And punishments within DOS for breaking any of the rules were painful, violent, and just straight up sadistic. Members were whipped on the bare ass, forced to walk through the snow barefoot, or hold painful poses for extended periods of time.
Yeah, and among all of the kind of crazy shit that went on in DOS, they were also forced to do readiness drills, where basically the master would text all of the slaves, ready, ? And if they had to respond within 30 seconds at any time of day. And if they didn't, then, any number of these punishments came in, not just for the person who was late, but for everyone else in the group too, of course. And there's so in the documentary series, I think it's called Seduced, which is about India Oxenberg's experience with Nxivm and DOS. They make a really good point where they're like, why would they ever need to be ready? What is this readiness? It's it's a military thing. It's the Navy. It's ready at a moment's notice. And some of the talking heads in that, they're it seems highly likely that he was trying to radicalize and militarize his followers. And he just didn't get the chance because the people caught on to him before that happened.
Yeah, I mean, if he had a few more years, say if we were only just discovering it now, what would be the state of that? We should also note that there were reportedly a number of different circles within DOS, as Taylor mentioned earlier. And not all women were branded. Not that excuses any of Nxivm's behaviour, but it does seem there were like various levels to DOS, much like Nxivm itself, and that the aim was to have thousands of women inducted into DOS, and Raniere was also reportedly planning to have DOS members run for state and national office and hold political power.
Yeah.
So that makes sense with like the military style training and radicalization.
Yeah, like taken over. And also, we should say that like this DOS group was initially sold to people, to women, as having nothing to do with Nxivm, being like separate outside of it, and also having nothing to do with Keith Raniere.
Yeah.
So most of these sort of lower level tiers in DOS didn't even know that he was involved.
Yeah.
And when in actuality, he was pulling absolutely all of the strings.
Yeah.
And holding everyone's collateral. So following Sarah Edmondson's story being published in the New York Times, hundreds of members began to leave Nxivm. And in late 2017, law enforcement began to investigate Raniere, Mack, and the Salzmans. In March 2018, Raniere was arrested in Mexico on charges of sex trafficking conspiracy, and conspiracy to commit forced labor. He appeared in federal court in Fort Worth before being transferred to New York and held in custody. And charges of racketeering were later filed as well. Raniere pleaded not guilty to all charges. In April, Allison Mack was also arrested on charges relating to sex trafficking. She was accused of coercing women into sexual activity with Raniere and performing other tasks for him, for which he paid her. Mack was released on $5 million bond and subjected to house arrest until the trial.
Yeah, I think she was like placed under house arrest, but at her parents' house in California.
Yeah.
So she was essentially handed into the custody of her parents.
In 2019, she pleaded guilty to racketeering charges. In May, prosecutors seized Nxivm properties in New York and conducted raids on the homes of numerous high-ranking Nxivm members, including Nancy and Lauren Salzman.
I don't know if we made this clear, but Lauren Salzman is a fully grown adult.
Yes.
Because we keep referring to her as Nancy's daughter.
daughter.
She's not like a teen. I mean, I'm sure she was, brainwashed from being a child or a teenager. But she was, at this point that we're talking about, she was a fully grown adult. She was not like a little girl.
Yes, yeah. And
So.
Lauren Salzman is, I believe, who recruited Sarah Edmondson into DOS and was her quote-unquote master.
So after the property raid, Nxivm was reported to have moved to Brooklyn and was being led by Claire Bronfman, but she was later arrested in July 2018 and charged with racketeering, but was released on a $100 million bond and subject to house arrest. Which, when you've got the kind of money that family has, is house arrest really that bad?
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you have a mansion the size of Disneyland.
Oh, easily. And like, they were just, wiping their noses with $100 million for Nxivm. So like, that's no big deal.
Yeah. I couldn't find out what happened to her sister. She seems to be talked about less. So Nancy and Lauren Salzman were both arrested and charged with racketeering. And in 2019, both pleaded guilty. Nancy Salzman pleaded guilty to racketeering criminal conspiracy, and Lauren pleaded guilty to racketeering and racketeering conspiracy. In May 2019, Raniere's trial began. It lasted 7 weeks. Witnesses included Lauren Salzman, filmmaker and former Nxivm member Mark Vicente, various victims whose identities are protected, and cult investigator Rick Allen Ross, who you may remember was one of the first people to accuse Nxivm of being a cult way back in 2003. It took the jury just 5 hours to find Raniere guilty of sexual exploitation of a child and possession of child pornography with regard to a minor victim known as Camilla, sex trafficking of a woman named Nicole, attempted sex trafficking of a victim known only as Jay, identity theft against Edgar Bronfman, James Lopafido, Ashana Chenoa, someone known only as Mariana, and Pam Kafritz. So that's a lot of people to try and whose identities you want to try and steal.
Yeah.
Trafficking for labour and services of a victim known only as Daniela. Forced labour of the woman known only as Nicole. Conspiracy to alter records for use in official proceedings. And finally, sex trafficking conspiracy, forced labour conspiracy, racketeering conspiracy, and wire fraud conspiracy.
All your conspiracies. Raniere was sentenced to 120 years in prison, which he is serving at the U.S. Penitentiary in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, and he was fined $1.75 million. Not nearly enough, if you ask me, but...
No.
In 2020, further charges were filed accusing Raniere and some associates of conducting psychological experiments on members of Nxivm. Allison Mack's sentencing trial is due to begin next week on June 30th, and she faces a minimum of 15 years to life in prison. The Saltzmans are also still awaiting sentencing. Claire Bronfman was sentenced to 6 years and 9 months for conspiracy to conceal and harbor illegal aliens for financial gain and fraudulent use of identification, was fined $500,000 in order to pay restitution of $96,000 to a victim known as Jane Doe 12, and is currently incarcerated at the Federal Detention Center in Philadelphia.
I mean, that shows just how many victims there are that they have to number their Jane Does.
Yeah.
And they've also got victims who are known by pseudonyms.
Yeah, no, it's the reach of this is so huge. And I feel like we're not really going to know how huge until, 25 years down the line.
I don't think we'll know until he dies, because I think there will be people who are literally living in fear.
Oh, yeah, I agree with that.
Because of what you're about to tell us next.
Yes, because, would you believe, there are a number of Nxivm and Raniere loyalists operating under a new name. They're known as We Are As You, which is not a good name.
It's really shit name.
It's terrible. It's hard to say. It's confusing. Whatever. And, of course, Keith Raniere maintains his role as head of the group from behind bars. And that is the story of the Nxivm cult. It's wild. And like we said, like there is a lot of detail out there that, like, if you want to go down this rabbit hole, you can go down it in like 20 different ways, which is interesting to me because, like, it's an interesting one to come back to as more information is revealed as well.
Yeah.
But like, it just sucks. Like, it sucks so bad. First, on the very base level, you're exploiting people who are trying to improve their lives or trying to get over traumatic experiences or whatever it may be, and you're bleeding them of thousands and thousands of dollars, and then in the process, like, indoctrinating a bunch of them into this total bullshit, like, crazy criminal organization.
And it's not just thousands, it's tens of thousands, it's hundreds of thousands in some cases. Yeah. The very wealthy, it was into the millions. Yeah. It wasn't a low-level scheme.
No.
And it wasn't like something just got out of hand. It was very clearly planned.
Oh, yeah.
As this predatory organization from the outset. One thing we haven't discussed is Raniere's upbringing or background, because we just do not have time, to be perfectly honest. Yeah, he did not achieve all of the things he claimed to have achieved as a child. he was a predator from a very young age. Like, he was in his early 20s and he was grooming 14-year-olds. Because it's not dating. When they're 14 or 15-year-olds, it is grooming.
Yeah.
If you are into your 20s, it is grooming.
Yeah. So he was doing this at a very young age, and then quite clearly continued on because he's been found guilty of possession of child pornography and exploitation of a child. So clearly there's more of that was happening within Nxivm than I think honestly gets talked about, because in all of these various high profile things that cover it, that's not really mentioned.
No, because the whole DOS can be made into this very scintillating, scandalous affair.
Yeah.
Almost.
It's like an S&M sex cult, which is what they always call it. Like, when in actuality, it's like this guy controlling women and coercing them into abuse of many kinds and raping them. Yeah. In a lot of instances.
And that actually leads us into the next point, which is Nxivm has a body count. So one of these young girls who Raniere had a relationship with, groomed, I think she was 14 or 15, she later took her own life.
Yep.
And there's a lot of questions around to what extent he was involved or at fault, or if he drove her to take her own life. Mm-hmm. Various defectors, detractors, critics have gone missing. One of those is a woman named Kristen Snyder.
Yes.
Who, there's an Oxygen article which we'll put in the show notes. So she vanished in Alaska.
So under Keith Raniere's Wikipedia page, they talk about the death of Gina Hutchinson and the disappearance of Kristen Snyder. So Kristen Snyder paid $7,000 to enroll in a 16-day course in Anchorage, conducted by Nancy Salzman. Following January, she traveled to visit Raniere and other leaders in New York. Snyder's mother recalled that her daughter, quote, had come to believe she was responsible for the Columbia shuttle disaster and thought Keith was incredible. And then they went to a course in Anchorage. Clifford later reported that on the 10th day of the course, Snyder began claiming to be pregnant with Raniere's child. In 2019, it was revealed that Claire Bronfman had claimed Snyder was indeed pregnant with Raniere's child. And then Snyder was last seen leaving the seminar, and her car was found in Seward, Alaska. And the supposed suicide note said, "I was brainwashed and my emotional center of the brain was killed / turned off. I still have feeling in my external skin, but my internal organs are rotting. I am sorry, life. I didn't know I was already dead. May we persist into the future."
And there was another page that said, "No need to search for my body." Yeah. That's not...
That's suspicious.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of questions about a lot of things. And I think that, as more information comes out, as more people are put behind bars, all of these various things, more of these details of things that have been covered up are going to come out. Like, even just that, the bit about Snyder saying that she was pregnant with Raniere's child was confirmed, as much as it can be, by Claire Bronfman in 2019. So that's after all these arrests have happened and stuff.
Yeah. So there's clearly something going on there if that's, still being
talked about.
Still something that's been talked about 16 years later. Very suspicious. And that shows that it didn't, whatever they were doing, it did not take long for them to take hold.
Yeah.
This is 2 16-day courses.
Yeah.
This is a month. Yeah, we all like to think that we're too intelligent to fall for this shit, but we're not.
Yeah, like,
and clearly they were doing something to that Kristen Snyder, you know, she was well educated, she had a master's degree, you know, quite professionally accomplished. You wouldn't think of her being vulnerable or falling victim to something like this.
And like, if you look at some of the higher ranking members within Nxivm, they had well-respected physicians who, in the process of joining and working their way up the ranks of Nxivm, started doing research, quote unquote, but probably were some of those psychological experiments where they like used like a, not an electrode helmet, but like an electro sensor, like brain helmet on people kind of things. And that's just what we know about.
The doctor who allegedly branded Sarah Edmondson was, you know, a qualified medical doctor, well respected. Yet she was doing that. Allegedly.
Yes. Of course. Like, there were high ranking business people and
the Bronfmans.
Mark Vicente was a documentary filmmaker who the film that he had produced is called What the Bleep Do We Know? And it's all about like neuroscience. And so like these are people who are either highly educated, have done research in certain areas, highly successful, like and all of the other walks of life as well. So it really covered everything. No one was immune.
Yeah, I don't think we need to really ask this question, but cult, yay or nay?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, the yays have it.
Yeah. Definitely a cult. Definitely probably even more culty than we even know at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, and like I say, that obviously Alison Mack's sentencing hearing begins next week. More will probably come out after that.
Oh, yeah.
The Salzmans are yet to be sentenced, I believe, so more will come out after that. But because they're still operating as this little, what we are as one or whatever, what was it called?
We are as you.
There will be things that will come out in years to come. Raniere is he's 60. So, yeah, he's got a few years left in him.
Yeah.
So, you know, in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years, whatever, I think there'll be a lot more comes out.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, potentially, a lot of the press about Nxivm may well have led people to discovering Raniere and becoming enchanted with him. And, you know, as happens with serial killers or cult leaders, you know, the Charles Manson thing.
Well, Ted
Bundy.
Ted Bundy.
Yep. He's got more attention now than he ever did before.
Yeah.
Yeah, so.
That's Nxivm.
That certainly is. Lots of links below. We'll point you in all the places if you want to go have a field day and read all about this stuff, because there's a lot out there that we just didn't have time to cover. But
yeah,
definitely a crazy one. So if you like the show, be sure to rate and review us on your podcast app, especially Apple Podcasts, Spotify, what have you. And do subscribe to us so you never miss a new episode. And if you want to get some Square Mile merch and rep us in the streets, as the kids possibly say, I don't know. I'm not one of them.
I don't think they've said that since we were kids.
Bummer. It's such a fun phrase. But if you do want to do that, we do have a selection of products with some cool designs Square Mile murdery designs, and you can find those at the link in our show notes or on our website.
If you would like to help us cover the costs of making the podcast and invest in the future of the show, you can join our Patreon page. Tiers start at just £1 per month. Every patron gets regular episodes 1 day early, a shout out on the show, priority case requests, and a lifetime discount on merch. And that's just £1 a month. As the tiers go up, you get even more, including bonus episodes and exclusive merch. So check that all out at patreon.com/Square Mile of Murder. Links are in all the usual places.
And we'll be back next week for the final cult of June.
Yes.
And this one is kind of a cult serial killer crossover.
Yeah, it's an ambitious one.
And it's quite topical, related to a recent Netflix series. So you can maybe figure it out from that. But
so yeah, we will see you back then. Thank you for listening.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.